ladies. Welcome to the Trinity Prep Author Fest. And this is the Christmas romance panel. What could be better than Christmas and romance? All the good stuff, right?
Absolutely.
And I want to introduce y'all first. I'm going to start with Tracy. Tracy Andreen is the author of So This Is Christmas. And she is also a writer and a director for the Hallmark Channel. Is that right?
Just a writer.
Just a writer. Okay. Well, still, that's amazing. And then Ashley Elston is the author of several YA books, including 10 Blind Dates, which is set at Christmas time in one of my favorite places, Shreveport, Louisiana. And Raquel Henry is one of my favorite Florida writers here in the Orlando area. She has the novelette, Holiday on Park, set on our beautiful Winter Park, Park Avenue. And she is also the editor of Voyage YA. So I'd like to welcome y'all all and thank you so much for sharing your time and talents with us here at the Trinity Prep Author Fest. And so I have lots of questions for y'all. Several of them are from students. So I will let you know when they are student-driven questions. All right, so other than the time frame of Christmas, how important is the setting of your story and how do you choose it? So y'all can just kind of jump in or go in any order that you want to.
I generally, my book setting was going to be Christmas from the beginning, and I knew that I wanted it to, because I had a very short period of time in which to write it. The setting, if you're talking about the physical setting, was at a small town in Oklahoma. And I'm from Oklahoma, so I was like, look, I'm gonna keep it right here in what I know for this striking distance, whatever it is. And so that was it. I knew I had to write I was commissioned or hired to write a Christmas YA. And I just set it in something that I knew. And then I just kind of let my imagination go. So, but the setting for me, and then the next one that I'm writing right now is set in it's taking the same characters from that setting, and then we're moving it to a prep school. So yeah, so setting is important for me, at least. Helps me it gives me kind of the ambiance and helps kind of guide the story to a degree. So.
Setting is pretty important for me too. And again, I said earlier, I have to apologize for my voice because the weather here has kind of got me all messed up. But I was writing this book kind of as my on the side book while I was waiting for edits for my thrillers, because I was writing thrillers. And why was I going to write a rom-com? I wasn't. So it was just for fun. And I come from a very big family. And so I just started playing around with the idea of that and what Christmas felt like to me growing up in a big family. And so when I was having lunch with my editor after we'd finished one of my thrillers, and she was like, well, what's next? I was like, I don't have anything. And she said, well, you've got something you're working on. I was like, oh, this silly little book at Christmas. It's not anything you're going to want. She was like, I don't know, I might want it. And the next thing I know, that was my next book. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. So I just did it more of just comfy, something fun to work on. So, I set it in my hometown, kind of like my family, so.
Setting's really important to me. I am a huge Hallmark fan, as Georgia knows. I'm kind of obsessed. I'm like an obsessed fan, especially with the Christmas movies. And that's what even inspired me to want to write, my own novelettes, because they're supposed to feel like a Hallmark movie in book form. And but the one thing I wasn't seeing was stories that were set in Orlando, Florida. And I'm from Orlando, Florida. I really wanted to see a holiday story set in my hometown. And then I also, I feel like Orlando's a city, but it can sometimes feel like a small town. Because oftentimes, I go places and I run into people that I know. And so that's also what I wanted to bring into the setting as well in the novelette, is that, even though it's a city, you can still feel like it's a small town too. So.
Yeah. Well, as a teacher, I love one of the things that I think y'all all said is that you write about what you know. I often, when I'm with the eighth graders especially, they're like, I don't have anything to write about. Well, you have plenty to write about. And sometimes what is kind of right under our nose, or where we've spent a lot of time, provides a lot of fodder for what we can write about. So I love that y'all shared that. They will appreciate that you echoed what I'm telling them in class. So what do y'all think about, I mean, obviously romance is huge, but romance at Christmas, it's just like, emotional overload. It's what about that is just so appealing? What do you think the draw of that is?
As one who's, I've only written one, published novel, but I've written a lot of stories set at Christmas. I think at this point, I honestly don't know how many that I've, have aired. I'm nearing 12 or 13, maybe 15 at this point, just for Christmas alone. And then I've worked on some probably 6, 7, 8 others that are also just exclusively set at Christmas. That's not including the other parts of the days of the year. But what I have found, having sort of basically living Christmas 24/7 for the last since 2013, is that it creates this time frame, this condensed time frame that people can tell stories. But more importantly, I think what it does is it creates this bubble of interconnectivity, which I think, especially with the United States, we are so spread out and we are so disconnected from our family and our friends. Like, we grow up in a small town, or we grow up in a particular part, and then we go to a different city, we go to a different state. Some people go to a different country. And the one thing that typically brings people back together is Christmas. It's a universality that doesn't really have any equal in terms of the everybody, whether or not you're a Christian, it almost doesn't matter. It's this time of the year that people come together, and you see your family again, and you see friends that you haven't seen in forever. And then you see that ex that you fall in love with again. What? No, but you do all of these things where you have this moment, and it allows for story and conflict and possibility in a way that which is why they're so often set in small towns, or in settings that can kind of mimic a small town. Like you were saying about Florida, that your community may be technically a city, but within it, that it's a small community, the community within it. And the same thing you can do, one of the things Hallmark is trying to do right now with their movies set going forward is not only have them in Pine Grove, so they're going to try to move them into more urban settings, but still create that sense of community within there. So I think that is what I have found in terms of storytelling, is what's the place that allows the most sort of intimacy in friendships, in family, in community, and in love. And that's the one thing that we can almost all kind of gather around for in a time that is, that can be complicated. That's what I have found.
Well, and you also get to see the family you don't want to see, right? It's not
Right.
just the ones you do want to see. You're like, oh God,
Uncle Benji,
he's going to be there again, and we're all going to have to whatever. I mean, that can be as much fun as the ones you want to see.
Yep. That's right. Oh, he's going to talk about that again. Oh man, what do we do?
I think what Tracy said about you don't have to be Christian, I think that's also something that's a key part of it as well. Because I was thinking as you were talking there, Tracy, one thing I used to teach my creative writing students, I used to teach. And one thing I would teach them is that if you can put something universal into the story, like something that everyone can feel and connect to, then you're off to a really good start. And I think that is the appeal of Christmas, along with romance at the holidays. It's something that makes people feel good. And it's not been an easy couple of years for us. So I think it got heightened even during these last couple years. That whole that feeling that people are basically trying to chase that feeling of just feeling good and warm and fuzzy. And Christmas and romance does that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Jill. How do you balance the comical with the romance and the seriousness, or do you?
Y'all all have that perfectly meshed together, but how do you manage that?
In terms of the narration of the individual story,
Sure.
honestly, it's just feel for me. I grew up with three brothers, and like I'm the only girl, and we're sort of all on top of it. It was just chaotic. And I think from our family, we had to have humor just to get through the day. And so I've had to kind of realize that I live in Los Angeles, and that not everybody kind of deals with dry, sarcastic humor out here the same way that I did growing up in Oklahoma. So I have had to sort of temper it a little bit, but not when I write. Then I can just kind of do what I want to do and go for it. But that's how just I get through the day as a person, and that sort of leaches into what I write, into the voices in my head. I always joke that writing is basically managed schizophrenia, and that's one of the voices, that is there. I'm like, oh, it's the funny, because otherwise it's gonna hurt too much. And then everybody loves a little love.
True.
Well, I mean, I came from a background of writing thrillers, and then I don't know where this book came from because, nobody died and there was no police presence. And people ask me, which one's harder? I mean, it's the thrillers, right? And I'm like, no, it's the rom-com, because like I may crack myself up and think I'm hilarious, but is anybody else going to agree with me? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that humor is so, it's hard. It's hard to get the voice just right, but when it's right, you know it, you feel it, and it works. But it's definitely different than anything else I've ever written. Is that balance, like you said, of some seriousness, but the fun and the humor and everything else. That's a harder balance to strike than the pacing of a good thriller, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I have to admit that question is harder for me to answer because I have no idea. I really don't. I don't think I'm funny at all. I really don't.
Oh,
I,
come on.
and I really don't. And then, well, so I had the two novelettes that I have out. Like I didn't really think that I had a whole lot of humor in them. They're lighthearted, But I did take, Georgia knows this. I took a class on how to write a Hallmark script, and in the class, like we would do like read, like we would every week we had to read pages of it, and my peers would be laughing at my script, and I was just shocked because I didn't think that was that funny. But apparently the script was funny, so I don't even know how I do it. But I think
You're a natural. You're a natural.
But so are you, Ashley. I can tell both
Right.
of you are. See, that's the thing. It's like, you're like, I don't know where it came from. I'm like, it came from within, because you're picking up stuff from around. And you can hear when somebody, like, I get, you were saying, Ashley, that you grew up with this big family and I'm like, that's where it came from. And Raquel, I guarantee you, you're listening, you're listening, you're listening,
Well,
you're listening.
I'm thinking it's probably either one of two things, or maybe both. My Trinidadian family, because I do have a little bit of a wild, like quirky family, especially on the extended side. And then I am not kidding when I say I study Hallmark movies. So I don't know if it's seeped into me somehow that way, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, yay.
All right. So did you always envision that you would write romance? And Ashley's kind of already touched on this, but if no, what else have you written or would you like to write other than romance?
I did not know that I would always write romance. I've always loved romances. I grew up reading all sorts, just always reading. When I turned 16, I'm a December baby. And my mom came home from Christmas once and was basically like, you have a job at the bookstore. And I'm like, was I looking? And she was like, it doesn't matter. They're hiring you. So because I was there so often and I read so much, and romances were a part of that, whether it's like, I was like reading little Harlequin romances, or I was reading, Jane Austen, that sort of thing. So there's always been, but also like, even when I would read your thriller, the romance would be part of it. I think that's having an emotional attachment for your protagonists. I think that helps make whatever, even if you're doing a thriller or a mystery or whatever, a family drama, helps kind of like carry the story, the narrative through. So that said, I wasn't certain I was going to write a romance. I just knew I wanted to write. I didn't care what it was. I love mysteries. I thought I was going to be a mystery writer, and I'm still going to try. I keep trying. I just have like, backlog of romances to deal with. But I'm like, it's funny. I'm like the inverse of Ashley in that I would love to write a thriller. Like I would just like, could I kill someone? I don't know. Can I?
Oh, it's so fun. It's so
yeah,
fun.
right.
Yeah. No, well, even in my thrillers, I'm hearing my own voice and I'm going to cringe.
You sound like Phoebe on Friends,
Okay, good. So should I sing later? No, I'm not going to sing. But
Silly cat.
but even with my thrillers, I do have that little bit of romance because I just think you have to have it, right? It's just not the spotlight. And maybe I set out to write this family blind date movie as a thriller, and like there probably should have been some cousins that got the axe, towards the end. They didn't, but then they just didn't. But I don't know. I think you have to. I think the romance has to be in there no matter what you write. But I definitely am more of a thriller writer. I had 4 thriller books before this one, and then I've just sold my first adult market thriller. So I'm back to thrillers. But that's not to say I won't go back to something like this. It's, I guess, whatever the mood hits.
I was Mrs. Dark writer, like the moody writer, like I write very dark and I only like dark things. And I had always, I loved romance, like to read. But in, the writing realm, I was really more like writing literary fiction. And then I switched gears a little bit to, after my MFA program to YA. And I thought I was going to write just dark YA books. But in between there, I got a gig ghostwriting romance. And I took that gig because I was like, oh, I'm never going to write romance. I don't care if I sign my rights away to this. It was like the kind of ghostwriting that you just basically you sign your rights away. Like you're not supposed to talk about it after and anything.
Fight Club.
Drop my drink.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to talk about it or anything like that. And then I started liking it a lot. I realized I was kind of good at it. And I started watching Hallmark. And then that's how it started, with the romances. I wanted to kind of tell those stories that I was seeing on screen. In terms of what I would want to write in the future, I still have young adult projects that are in the works with my agent. So I'm still, those are still going to go someplace at some point. And I would really like to write a thriller or a mystery someday. I think that would be cool. I don't know how to do it, but I think it would be cool to explore because I do like reading them too. So I read.
That's interesting to me that y'all all have the romance element in common, but you also kind of lean toward the thrillers. That's interesting.
I grew up reading Agatha Christie. My favorite Christmas was when I got, I had put down, I was 10 years old and I asked for all of the Agatha Christie's and I got probably about 70% of them. And I was just, I still remember it. I was basically took all my books, went over and just started reading. And my mom was like, please come and join the family. And I was like, but I have all these books.
I was reading sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say some of the first books I read were the Nancy Drew books.
Right.
So, yeah.
I did Sidney Sheldon. I'm gonna show my age. I did Sidney Sheldon in high school. But his were the first ones that I was they had a plot twist you didn't see coming. And I was like, what? How'd you do that? And
Sidney Sheldon's a good writer though. I mean, Mr. I Dream of Jeannie.
I know. I Dream of Jeannie. And then all his books, right? Yeah. I'm afraid to reread his books because I'm afraid they're not going to hit the same way now that they did.
I bet they don't. I bet they don't either. But he had a certain commercial quality to his narrative that you just were, it was a total beach book. It's never going to win an award for what a great writer. But you're like, I'm hooked.
I was way too young when I read those books. I don't know what. But that was my, when I started writing, I was like, okay, how did he do that? How did he trick me? I want to do that. What would Sidney Sheldon do?
Yeah. So Agatha Christie, by the way, was brilliant at doing that. Like she would do this thing where she would, get you over here and red herring you over here. And you're like, it's got it. And then something was like, nope, here. And you're like, what?
Fantastic.
How did it? What? It was awesome.
All right. So this next question is from one of our 8th graders.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jen Smith, and if you could choose the actors to play the love interest in your books, who would you choose?
For our novels?
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh,
Okay, this is my problem. I'm gonna say Brad Pitt, but he's gonna have to be the grandfather, right? Like, I don't know anybody young. I don't know any young actors that would be like 17, right? Like I'm like, oh, that Matt Damon, no, but I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm terrible at this question.
I'm not great either.
This is what you did though. You're in the movie.
No, for the young adult. If you're going to ask me for a
adult.
Hallmark movie, I could do that, all day and twice on Sunday. But for a young adult novel, particularly with Arthur, who's my male protagonist, he's half Indian, half British, white British. So he's biracial British and super uptight, which I adore. But I don't. And I've gone through and I keep finding images that I look and I'm like, that kid is Arthur. But I found an actor and I was like, this is the kid if we ever do it. And I can't remember his name to save my life. Maybe can I email it in and say this is who would be Arthur?
Yes. Email it in.
Right?
Tweet it out to me.
Right. And then the Finley would probably be a 16, who's the female protagonist, who's 16 years old. Emily, who just did one of my movies, she's 30 now, but if you take her back to when she was in Hannah Montana and Emily.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Emily Osment. Yes. Emily Osment would probably, she has just the right balance of neurosis and heart. And Finley's a little bit of a neurotic, anxiety-ridden 16-year-old who's trying so hard and failing all over the place. So,
well, my characters are a little bit older, but they're young adults, but they're older, right? So I think I can get away with casting adults that look maybe young, which I like the actress Alvina August. So I wouldn't mind if she played Juliet, and I really like Rome Flynn.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind if Rome was cast as Ivan.
Wasn't he just in a Hallmark movie?
He was in a Christmas duet, which was a couple years ago, but yeah.
Okay, that's what it was. They replayed it recently, and I remember looking up and going, "Who is that guy?"
So cute, right? I wish he would do another one because I thought he was awesome in that one.
He's super handsome. He's like 5-star on the handsome scale. So
and I like the actress in that one as well. I wouldn't mind her either. I forget her name. Oh, Shaylee Rose, I think is.
Oh no! Oh my God, Shaylee Rose. I actually did 2 years ago in 2019 before the world closed down. That's before time. I was on a Christmas panel session with her, and it was one of those moments where I had to sit next to her. And you want to talk about something that's a little like, oh, great, you're gonna put me next to the supermodel? Like what?
Was that in California? Was that in California?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. I wanted to go.
Oh my God. It was just one of those things where I was like, 1, I wish I'd picked a different outfit. 2, boy, do I wish I'd done my hair different. And 3, anyone between me and her, please. Just not fair, world. Yeah, she's stunning.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that makes me want to go back and watch Christmas Duet because it would be like almost too much pretty on the screen.
All right, I have another one from one of our 8th graders, and they wanted to know, other than writer, what other jobs, or have you had any other jobs?
Yes, and they were all in practice to become a writer. To be honest, I've always known since I was this is both an advantage and a disadvantage in that I grew up from the time I was a little kid always knowing I was going to be a writer. And I went through a panicked session a few years. I've had a couple of panics along the way, where I tried to do something else and just wasn't happy. So, but the closest I came to not being a writer was when I moved to Los Angeles from Oklahoma, and I became a film development executive. So I ended up still in the world of narrative, of storytelling, but from a different perspective, in that I was reading the writing of others and helping shape it from that, from that angle and perspective. And I ultimately, that wasn't what I wanted to do, but the closest I came still involved storytelling. Yeah.
I went to college and met my husband. He did not live where I lived. He lived an hour and a half down the road. So I looked up what could you study in that town because I wanted to go follow him. And they had a nursing school. So I was going to go be a nurse at Northwestern because I'm from Monroe. And so that was horrible. And I did not get a nursing school, which is the best thing that ever happened to me because I would make a terrible nurse because my kids like cut their fingers and I like have to leave the room. So then anyway,
My kids.
yeah. And so, but then photography was a hobby of mine. And so I actually spent 10 years as a wedding photographer, which is storytelling in a totally different way. And I think it actually helped with when I really did sit down and try to start writing, which was much later. I mean, I sold my first book when I was 38, I guess. And, but in my mind, I kind of set up a scene, like almost like I would a photograph. Like, what does it look like? What, like it's very visual to me, probably from the photography background. And so, so the photography.
I have had several jobs. I used to be a file clerk in human resources when I was a student at USF. I worked in the study abroad office at one point. I was a receptionist for a law firm for 5 years. I was also a bookseller. So I worked at 2 different bookstores for many years. And then I also right now, I mean, I technically have 2 jobs because I'm an editor and a writer, but I also own my own writing studio. So I'm, I run that as well. And what else? Yeah, I think those are kind of the main ones. Done some other little things here and there, but yeah.
I'm going to bring it back and say that I actually did have a period after I left film development where I worked as far away from film world as possible. And I worked at an economic think tank in administration. So very similar, where I was having to, and it was basically because my life in the film development world was all about reading stories. And it kind of affected my ability to tell my own story. So I needed to go someplace that was as far away from storytelling as possible. So when Raquel, when you said that, I was like, yeah, that, I kind of forgot about that for a second. I was like, yeah, that was a big part of my life, was just, paying the bills, getting insurance.
Yes.
And then, but still having a space in my brain to focus on my own creativity. And that just something as simple as repetitive activity of administration was.
Yeah. And how could I forget this one? I was also a professor for 60 years. But I was that triggered.
I was an astronaut once.
My husband we have a landscape company, and I am the holder of the pesticide applicator certification. So
Bravo.
chemicals. So
I totally forgot about that. But you know what? I was gonna say that used to give me a lot of ideas for YA because I taught a lot of college.
I bet.
Right?
Yeah.
You got to see it firsthand.
Yes.
You and Georgia.
I kind of miss it.
Aw.
Well, I love this because I think it's so great for young people to hear that there's not like one path to get you where you think you're going to end up or where you just end up. I think sometimes in our society, they think that there's a certain formula, and there's really not.
Can I tell you one thing? When I was at OU, the University of Oklahoma, and I was in getting my degree in writing, I panicked and changed my degree for a year to speech and hearing disorders because I had gone in to talk to my counselor, and I asked him, how long after you graduated before you started making money as a writer? And he said 20 years. And I about died because I was like, I have student loans. What are you talking about? So I changed my major for a year. Yeah, 20 years. And I was like, oh, I can't do that. And so I panicked. And then I was in this other major that I didn't like for a year. And I ultimately was like, I got to go back. And I did. And what's funny, I talked to the counselor, to Jack Bickham, and he was like, I knew you'd come back. But I'm telling you, it's a little daunting when you get told, oh yeah, good luck. 20 years from now, you'll maybe make money on your chosen field. And you're like, what am I supposed to do in the meantime, buddy? You know,
I think that's why most of us do something else. I mean, like we had our landscape company and I did the bookkeeping. Like I was the office, right? For whatever that, because that's the business that kept the lights on.
Right.
The writing was fun, but that wasn't, especially at the beginning, was not keeping the lights on.
Right. Yeah.
I was gonna say I had a similar story, Tracy, only it was that I spent a lot of time in the beginning in a different major because I was like, oh, you can't make money as a writer. And I had a professor that basically pulled me aside and said, this is where you need to be. And eventually, I would change my major. But I did want to say, Georgia, because you said a lot of the students like kind of sometimes think like, oh, there's like a formula. One thing I decided, when I was getting my degree, from that point, once I started creative writing, I was going to put myself in every single position possible to submerge myself into the writing world, whatever that was. And even though like the receptionist job was the job that paid the most, while I was there, I was doing a lot of free work. Like I was learning how to be an editor and doing a lot of free type of work to practice. And I started a literary magazine at that time. And I was just trying to do everything I could to get myself into like the writing path. And then eventually like teaching, that I was teaching English and creative writing. So that was like kind of like, finally it's starting to like merge here. So my advice to your students would be like, if you really want to be a writer, just put yourself everywhere you can in the beginning, that into things that are like associated with writing.
That's excellent. All right, so I have time for one last question. So if this kind of segues right into it, if you could, what was the best piece of writing advice that you were ever given?
Write and read. Honestly,
like not like stop talking about it. Like I have so many people like, if I had time, I'd write. If I had this, I'd write. Well, got me too. Okay, just shut right.
Yeah, no, and read. Read. That's the number one advice. Anytime someone asks me, what's your advice? Read. If you want to write, a Hallmark movie, read Hallmark movie scripts. If you want to write mysteries, read mysteries. When I was coming into the YA world, you bet your bottom dollar I sat down and I read as many YA books as I possibly could in between like writing 4 movies. I was like reading, like doing all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Read and write. That's it.
There's a lot of good advice, I feel like, but so it's hard to choose. But I'm going to talk about my dear friend, Amy Christine Parker.
I know her.
Yeah.
I love her.
Yes, I love her.
She's amazing.
Yes.
And I had a very rough journey to like getting an agent. It took me like 7 years. And like 8 drafts of a novel, right? Off and on, I'd be revising and fixing. But through that time, I remember I was crying on the corner of like one of the Disney resorts with Amy. And I'm like, and then this person rejected me. And she said, listen, the only difference between you and the person who you see on the New York Times bestseller list, the person that you think is making it, only difference between you and that person is that person didn't give up. They didn't stop. They didn't quit. Yeah. They kept going. And that piece of advice just always sticks with me because writing is really hard and publishing can be really tough sometimes. And I just go back to that advice time and time again.
Yeah, that's great advice.
It is. Excellent. Yeah. All right. Well, ladies, we are out of time, if you can believe it. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and being part of the Trinity Prep Author Fest. I cannot thank you enough for sharing your time and talents. And
Thanks
I
for
can't wait
having
to
us.
read some more books from y'all.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having
You're
us.
so welcome.